Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I am Mark Ruffin. We are here at the Hamptons Jazz Fest, which is an incredible festival. Over 40 shows during the whole summer, and you folks up in the Hamptons, you have to be so appreciative of so many great shows. And tonight, we're presenting 3 Lives in Jazz. These great musicians, including Bill O'Connell, Santi Debriano, and NEA Jazz Master, Billy Hart. I'm done talking for a minute. Let them play.
So we're going to start with a tune from my new CD called "A Change Is Gonna Come." This is called "Enough Is Enough." I guess you can figure out where I'm coming from with that one.
Wow. You're listening to Three Lives in Jazz from the LTV Media Center. We're going to talk to each one of them so you get to know them a little bit. First thing you should know about Bill O'Connell is he is a Long Island boy, so he is from here.
That's right. That's right.
But we're going to play a little name game. I'm going to give you a name. You tell me who these people are and what they meant to you. I hope this works.
Okay.
Irv Kratka.
Oh, wow. All right, you're throwing me a curve right away. Irv Kratka, my first album in the 70s, entitled Searching, with two of my friends, Jeff Pappas on drums and Mike Willens on bass. I think Jeff passed away. I think Mike is still with us, living in Europe. We just played a lot together. We did a record, and Irv Kratka said, "Yeah, I'm going to put this out. You need those people in the beginning, in the beginning to get you going. That's important. Like Irv did that. He gave us a shot. I think Mongo Santa Maria was like that for me too, because Mongo that was my first road gig.
Mongo Santa Maria was your first road gig?
First road gig, yeah.
Wow. So Irv Kratka is a guy who owned a record label in
called
the 70s
Inner
and
City.
80s.
Inner City.
And your first album, what was the title again?
Entitled Searching, yeah. Wow.
Okay, here's another name. Creed Taylor.
Well, that's, I did one record for Creed. I had played a couple of records with Charles Fambro for Creed, and Creed heard me play there. And what I remember about that is, we recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's studio, and Creed Taylor and Rudy were like a team. And they almost made you feel like it wasn't your record. It was there. I was rehearsing the band, and Rudy came over to me and said, "No, this is not a rehearsal studio. This is a recording studio." I just want to get the music right. So I went over to Creed, and I said, "Creed, what's happening here, man?" He said, "Don't worry, just do what you got to do, So the first day of the recording session was like nothing. We got nothing done. And the second day was absolutely beautiful. Rudy got the greatest sound, one of the greatest sounds on the piano that I've ever had recorded. And we loved each other. And Creed was the in-between man on that. But, Creed gave me a shot. And Creed also took a full-page ad out in the New York Times for that record. And he said, "Bill, in 6 months, your life is going to be really different." Well, it wasn't that different. But his heart was in the right place. He was trying.
Yeah, well, so I'll tell you, Creed Taylor was a major record producer, one of the most important people in jazz history. He owned a record label called CTI. Before that, he worked for Verve Records. Along with Rudy, they made the song "The Girl from Ipanema" with Stan Getz. And the promo man for "The Girl from Ipanema." You remember who I told you the promo man for "The Girl from Ipanema" was?
Yeah, I don't remember the name.
Joe Fields.
Oh, Joe. Right, Joe.
So tell them who Joe Fields is.
Well, Joe Fields, once Dave Valentine stopped recording for GRP, I brought Dave to Joe. I don't know how I knew Joe. I had done some project for him, I guess. And I brought Dave Valentine to Joe, and Joe immediately signed Dave, and we did a few records for Joe. And then he saw what I could do with Dave, and he said, "Bill, let's do your own thing." So I've been recording with Joe, and Joe passed away a few years ago, and now his son Barney is carrying on the torch, and I've done quite a few records for them. So Joe's got a special place in my heart because he gave me a chance to do my own thing, and that's isn't that what we all want to do?
Again, one of the most important people in jazz history to me is Joe Fields. He had his record company now is High Note and Savant.
Right.
You record for
Savant, yeah.
He also had the record company Muse.
Right.
He had the record
Buddha,
company.
maybe? Was he Buddha?
Cobblestone, which was a subsidiary of Buddha, right.
Yeah.
So man, you've been around all these record people, and you mentioned Dave Valentine, but before I get to Dave Valentine, Chet Baker and Sonny Rollins. Yeah. You were also with them. Can you talk just a little bit about each?
Yeah. I mean, I was, anytime you work with those kind of people, you're blessed, really. And I worked with Chet. I was working with Chet right around the same time I was working with Mongo. That's quite a duo, right? Imagine a record with Chet and Mongo. I was playing a gig. Chet asked me to go to Europe with him. People had said, be careful going to Europe with Chet for various reasons. And Mongo asked me to go out to the West Coast at the time and with his band. So I went with Mongo at the time. But I will say the time with Chet was fantastic. Chet was the closest I ever got to playing with Miles in a way. That kind of sensibility, that subtlety. But also, people don't know Chet had a ferocious side to him too. On the gig, he could play some lines that in my 20s made me want to go home and just practice. I just wanted to get to the piano and try to approach what he could do.
Well, what did Sonny Rollins make you feel like?
Oh, well. Well, Sonny, well, that's the closest I ever got to playing with Coltrane, I guess, but maybe that's not even fair to Sonny, because Sonny's such a force on his own. Sonny, it was great. It was great playing with Sonny. He because of his energy, really, his energy and his melodicism, his playing of melodies, and just his overall vibe, his sense of humor, and he brought that to the music too, which was, we're all trying to play like some heavy stuff and everything, and Sonny would go bump it up, in the midst of like this other crazy stuff that was just like otherworldly. So he taught a lot. Plus, Sonny he's a great guy. He was fun to hang out with, and I played with a lot of great musicians playing with Sonny. So getting next to Sonny and his energy was really a great thing.
Now, man, we could spend a half hour talking about you and Dave Valentin. How many records you make with Dave Valentin, you think?
It had something like 15 to 20, I would think.
How'd you meet him? How'd that all get together? I mean, Dave Valentin was a flute player who recorded for GRP Records. First, he was on Arista, and then he was on GRP Records.
Right.
And was very successful for a flute player in jazz. So,
yeah. Well, there are two stories here. Dave says we met because I was playing. Before I played with Mongo, I was also playing in Latin bands in New York. Mongo was not my first experience in Latin music. So I got the gig with Mongo because I kind of knew what to do in that genre. But Dave says we met while I was playing with a Latin band somewhere, and I don't remember it that way. I think I subbed for Oscar Hernandez. Oscar Hernandez called me because he was the original piano player with Dave. So I think I just met him subbing on that, and we hit it off. And I didn't immediately start playing with Dave, but then Dave, a few years, maybe a year or two later, said, "Hey, I want to change up my band, and I want you to be in it." And that led to like a lifetime of friendship and a lifetime of making music, a special
how many years? 20?
Oh, no, 30, 35 years. I mean, there aren't that many in life that last that long,
Marriages don't last that long.
That's right.
Dave, how did you get into Latin jazz?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people know you for Latin jazz.
Right.
How'd you get into that?
I was living in New York in the 70s, and the Latin scene was pretty vibrant. There were all these Latin clubs, and I always loved the music. I heard Herbie played with Mongo, Chick Corea, some of my heroes played with Mongo, and I said, man, and then I heard what Mongo was doing and others like him, and I was intrigued. So I got a call from a trumpet player, a guy named Steve Gutman, and he said, hey, man, the piano player can't make it. And I went down to this and played with this funky Latin band in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn, which at the time was a little more serious than is now. Now it's like yuppified and money. It's like living in the Hamptons, I guess. But it's there was a great bass player, a guy named John Henry Robinson. He taught me a few basic things so I could get through the gig. And the cats, they put up with me while I was playing Montunos, but then when they heard me solo, they were like, "Oh, this is great." They wanted, they heard all my jazz chops, and they were, they said, "Yeah, come on in." And while I was soloing, I learned the idiom kind of and brought myself to it because that's what I'd like to bring to any kind of music I'm playing. That's bringing what I think I can add to it. And so that got me started.
You know, I think there are people today who pick up a Bill O'Connell record, and if it's not Latin jazz, they're surprised, you know?
Yeah, I came to New York as a jazz player, man, wanting to do all that. I got into the Latin thing heavy, and frankly, I'm surprised more of my contemporaries didn't, because to me it's as burning as what we do up on stage and any kind of other rhythm, you know, but I just loved it. So
We're talking to Bill O'Connell here at the LTV Media Center in the Hamptons.
Yeah.
And your new album is called A Change Is Gonna Come.
Right.
What is that about?
Well, I mean, you know, anytime I can get slightly political, you know, I think we live in a time where we need some major changes. The first tune we played, Enough Is Enough, well, I won't go with the inspiration of that, but there's some things you see out there in the world and you go like, enough is enough, come on. And so I had this concept to do A Change Is Gonna Come, and it just felt like it's a great tune by Sam Cooke, and I felt like, man, I want to do that. So there's that. There are a few other tunes on there that if you listen to them, maybe the titles have a little bit of a political bent, but of course the music stands on its own. That's the main thing.
It sure does. And speaking of that,
all right, now we're going to do a tune written by Santi, inspired by the rainforest in Puerto Rico. This is called El Yunque.
That was beautiful. Oh my goodness. I fell in love with this man's composing and his bass player, killer bass lines in his compositions. And I've only known about him for the last 20, 25 years, but he had a history before that. Santi Debriano, please, one more time, folks, please. We are at the LTV Media Center at the Hamptons Jazz Festival with 3 Lives in Jazz, Bill O'Connell, Billy Hart, and Santi Debriano. Santi, man, woo. So you wouldn't be offended if I called you a Panamaniac, would you?
I'm a Panamaniac, that's
He's
what I
a
am.
Panamaniac.
I am. Yeah.
And by that I mean he's from Panama, And there's a few very famous jazz folks from Panama. Want to talk about some of those?
Sure. It started with Louis Russell.
Wow, Louis Russell. Louis Russell is Louis Armstrong's former music director and the father of Catherine Russell.
And that's right. But we've had a long string of people involved with jazz, from Billy Cobham, Randy Weston, whose father is from there. We also have, of course, Danilo Perez, who's a great friend of mine, and yours, I take. And also Carlos Garnett is from there. Alex Blake is from Panama. There's quite a number of people.
Some great soulful musicians, too.
Yeah. And thanks to, maybe it's thanks to the Danilo Perez Foundation, now we're starting to find another young generation of great musicians that are about to blast onto the scene. There's a fellow playing with me that was up here just the other day with my sextet, Flash of the Spirit. His name is Cito Lavelle. Plays trombone and plays percussion, and he's just getting started. You know, he just got his master's degree. And there's another person I'd like to mention who is Angie Obin, great flute player, young, I think she's about 27, 28, who graduated from Berkeley with all honors, and she started with the Danilo Perez Foundation. I met her first when she was 15 years old.
Wow. Danilo, by the way. Yes, please. Danilo, by the way, has a great jazz festival. It's always a great time for people from the Hamptons to go because it's in January. It's a great time to go to Panama, right?
That's right.
You know, man, like I said, I fell in love with your playing with the record Circle Chant, and I followed you afterwards. But I was really surprised to learn that you come from the avant-garde. Really surprised. Starting with Archie Shepp. How did you get involved with avant-garde and with Archie?
Well, you know, Archie Shepp gave me my first chance on the international jazz scene, and I'll always be honored to have him as my mentor. But of course, I started playing music long before I met Archie Shepp. You know, I was I'm a product of the New York City public schools, and when I was in the 4th grade, they targeted me as somebody who was gifted in, or potentially gifted in music. And so they moved me and a few of my schoolmates from the local public school into a special program that they had set up for kids that were potentially good in the arts. And we took academic subjects in the morning, and in the afternoon, after lunch, we had orchestra, you know, youth orchestra, 3 days a week, and painting and drawing 2 days a week. And that's how I went to school from 4th grade through 6th grade, and we were in the same program in the 7th grade, in the middle school, skipped the 8th grade, and then in the 9th grade we were in the same program, and then went off to high schools after that.
When did jazz come into the picture?
Jazz, basically, during that time, by the time I started middle school, I was in the local band. Are you familiar with the name Jerome Harris, Jerry Harris? Played with Sonny Rollins. Sonny's from Jerome is from my neighborhood, and he was in the local band on guitar. And I had started playing guitar when I was in middle school. So he left the local band to go on to, he got accepted into Harvard when he was very young, 14 years old. And he left, he grew up in the projects across the street from mine. I grew up in the pink houses, and I think his was the blue houses or something like that. So he left Brooklyn, East New York, to go to Harvard, and I took his place in the local band. And that band was playing like for dances and stuff, but they started playing jazz stuff. Billy Taylor came to my middle school with the Jazzmobile, I guess the early stages of Jazzmobile, and he was playing with, it was Willie Ruff, the bass player. And they had a drummer who I won't remember right now, but they played Coming Home Baby. And we went straight from that concert to our rehearsal place and learned Coming Home Baby by ear. That's the way it was for us, you know. And then the other people in the neighborhood, at that time, you know, there were no such thing as jazz lessons and jazz programs or anything like that. It was people in the neighborhood that tried to turn us on to tunes. I remember one time an older fellow in our neighborhood, the Black Panther, local Black Panther. We were all kids. We were kind of afraid of him because he was a tough guy, older. He said, "Come here," and he said, I want you to hear something." All angry and stuff. And he took us upstairs to his apartment in the projects, and he played John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk. And I was so young, it was hard for me to hear that stuff, you know. It sounded like mathematics and hieroglyphics and stuff. But I sat right there and listened. And that was my first real hearing of those people. I'd heard from my father, who was a pianist, more of the classical jazz things. And he was playing, like, at the home, he was playing Ahmad Jamal, and he would play, I remember he played Round Midnight, Miles Davis record, and he was playing like George Shearing, you know, stuff like that. He played Dave Brubeck, Time Out, you know, that record, you know, but we weren't listening in my parents' home to John Coltrane.
and then you took it further by
Yes.
going to Sam Rivers,
That's
Oliver Lake.
Those are the
that's
guys
to
that-
some folks, that's hieroglyphics and mathematics. you know?
Those are the guys that really introduced my way into the jazz world, those guys. Sam Rivers. I was 4 years with Archie Shepp, 2 years with Sam Rivers. I moved to Europe while I was still with Archie, and Sam would come and pick me up and take me on the road. We went all through East Germany and all those places in the Eastern Bloc, and then Oliver Lake came and did the same thing. He had Jerry Allen along with him, and it was just a wonderful time for me. It was a great time for the music. I remember when Art Ensemble of Chicago came through, and they set up residency in Paris and everything. It was great. There were a lot of very interesting musicians around at that time.
So what do the avant-garde players teach you about straight ahead jazz, about the mellow way you write, the counterpoint you do? I mean, did any of that influence what you do now?
Of course, I think so in terms of my tastes for choosing players. I like musicians that can suggest this more than just what's on the page and pushing for something maybe ceremonial or spiritual inside of them, something more than what their book learning has taught them. I've always liked that. And I think a great example of that would be Archie Shepp, you know, Cecil Taylor. Those guys, they pushed each other they pushed themselves to say probably more than they knew that they could do, you know. I remember playing Giant Steps with Archie Shepp for like 40 minutes. He would take a long solo that long, and then when he was done, he'd turn to the piano player and say, "Take a solo." I'd be on bass and saying like, "Oh no." Yeah.
Well, by the time you got to play with Hank Jones and Freddie Hubbard and folks like that,
Yes.
You were
Well,
seasoned.
I played, the person that brought me back to New York City was the great Kirk Lightsey. And with Kirk, I learned the repertoire of the New York pianists. And so it was wonderful because I did have the other sensibility with me, but Kirk brought me back to, you know, tunes and playing really in tune and having that sort of more erudite approach, I suppose you'd call it. I just loved working at Bradley's with Kirk Lightsey, and then I met, of course, Hank Jones and Kenny Barron and John Hicks, with Larry Willis and those guys, all the great New York City pianists. I didn't meet you though in that period. I don't
He
know
was too
where
busy
you were.
playing Latin jazz. He was.
Well, I'll just interject for a second. I mean, Santi and I should have met then.
We should have met then.
I mean, because we did meet, I don't know, how long, was it, 10 years ago or something? I don't know, something like that. But there were 20 years that we missed each other where we should have been.
And it always comes up when we're hanging out.
Yeah.
How did I miss you?
You know, we were sort of in a circle, but but thank God we did hook up. That's all I say.
Yeah. You didn't miss that guy, though, Billy Hart.
Oh, yeah, but listen, Billy Hart is one of my idols from back when I was in college. We listened to Herbie Hancock crossings every day. And then, and then after that, sextant every day. Come on, I've known this guy. I've admired him from the longest, and then what a joy to be meeting him and playing with him. And we found out that we were neighbors for a while, and we were in the same town, right? Englewood, New Jersey. But we wound up making records together.
For a long time now, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's Billy Hart is on my first record that I made, called Obea. It was a piece that was produced by a French producer. Jabali and Sonny Fortune played on it, Kenny Barron played on it, and Jerry Gonzalez played on it too.
Wow. And you were in Billy's band for a while?
I was in Billy's band. We made a couple records, 2 or 3. Two or three.
2 or 3.
We recorded El Yunque, which we just played.
Like I said earlier, man, I fell in love with Circle Chant. That's about 20 years old, ain't it?
Yeah, already that long, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
That record was done for Joe Fields.
That's right.
For
Savant.
Yeah.
And your new one is called Flash of the Spirit.
Well, that's the new one that's released. There's another one in the oven about to come out.
So, a Flash of the Spirit, which I love. And it's the name of the band as well?
That's the name of the band, Flash of the Spirit.
Who's in that band?
Well, recorded with us was Tommy Campbell on drums, Bill O'Connell on piano, Justin Robinson played alto saxophone, and Andrea Brachfeld. We also had Francisco Mella played some drums for us, and Valcino did some singing with us, Valcino Anacosta. It's a beautiful record, actually.
It's a beautiful record.
Thank you.
I just can't let it
Thank
go.
you.
It's called Flash of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Beautiful record. Now, what's in the oven?
So we have a 9-piece band that was assembled during the pandemic. Just after the pandemic, clubs started closing, and everyone was home. But I had the space underneath my house. My house had been raised since Hurricane Sandy, and I had this space, like dead space under my home, so I closed it in, and then I put some screens up so that the air would just flow in there. And then when I invited musicians to come over, everyone felt safe because it was kind of like playing outside. So we started doing weeklies. They'd come over, my wife would cook food, the saxophone player, a baritone saxophone player, Ray Scroll, he's a gourmet chef also. So he would come over with food, and then some people from the audience would be like members of the neighborhood, and some other people that were interested in hearing music, would come over from Brooklyn and whatnot. So sometimes we'd have like 5, 6, 7, 10 people sitting in couches down there, and the band would be like, usually I had 9 people that would come. Mamiko Watanabe came every week, Ray Scroll, we had Craig Handy sometimes. We had Robbie Amin start coming over, and like that. A lot of people came.
All your compositions?
I started bringing my compositions in, and sometimes Ray brought his. And now on the record coming out, which is on JoJo Records, it's got mainly my compositions, and maybe I think we did a beautiful tune by Bobby Hutcherson. This tune, Till Then, which was on the Oblique record.
This also has another name, the littlest one of all.
Is that another
It's the
name
same
for it?
song?
Yeah,
man.
really?
Yeah, Freddie
Right.
Hubbard on Keystone Bop. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm such a nerd, sorry.
I didn't know that. Thank you for that. That's a beautiful song. So we did our arrangement of that tune.
Wow. And when is it coming?
At the end of September, beginning of October. And it's going to be on JoJo Records.
And the name of it again?
It's going to be only an LP. And the name of the record is going to be Ashanti. It's one of my tunes.
And you will hear it on Sirius XM for sure. How about listening to this trio one more time? Give Santi Debriano a big hand.
All right, we're going to continue with a standard called Three Little Words. Thank you. We're going to do another tune of mine entitled "Come Back." This was inspired. I had a argument with one of my sons, and I just felt so bad after it. Who knows who was right, who was wrong, but I just felt like, all right, we've done that. Let's come back together again. So this came out of that.
Just beautiful. Thank you, guys. You're listening to 3 Lives in Jazz from the LTV Media Center at the Hamptons Jazz Festival. I am Mark Ruffin. We're on Real Jazz in front of a very enthusiastic audience, right? And we already covered That Life in Jazz, Bill O'Connell. We covered a bit of This Life in Jazz, Santi Debriano. It would take us all night to cover his life in jazz. The great Billy Hart, everybody. If you don't know, Billy Hart is a 2022 NEA Jazz Master. It's the highest honor our government gives to jazz musicians. It comes with the honor and a check. But Billy is not the first NEA Jazz Master who's a drummer from Washington, D.C., right?
No.
Hey,
Who's that drummer?
Jimmy Cobb.
Jimmy Cobb, that's right, from Washington, D.C. Now, you just told me about another young drummer you like from Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
What's his name?
Cush Abaday.
Yeah. Talk about your time playing music outside of jazz at Howard.
Well, let's see. There's a couple of those guys I can't name. I can't remember their name. Maybe you can help me. It's You Send Me.
Wow.
You remember that guy?
Yeah, the title track to your album, Change Is Gonna Come, Sam Cooke, right?
Sam Cooke.
Yeah.
So yeah, I played with Sam. I played with Jackie Wilson.
Wow.
You know.
And you told me something about playing with Riri.
Hello?
Aretha.
Oh yeah, when she was really young, and she was about 18 when I played with her. Yeah.
And you started on drums in D.C., is that right?
I did. Yeah.
And when did Wes Montgomery come into your life?
Well, that was a little later. That was after Jimmy Smith.
After Jimmy Smith.
And Jimmy Smith was after Shirley Horn.
So, but Shirley kept you in D.C.
I was a younger guy, but I was the only drummer in town, a younger drummer in town in those days. Mm-hmm. So I got a chance to play with a lot of these people, including a lot of the Brazilian people, because Charlie Bird had a club in Washington called the Showboat, and so a lot of those guys would come by, like João Gilberto. So I got a chance to play with him before Stan Getz.
Wow. Wow.
And Tom Joe Beam, too.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought I knew all about Billy Hart. Man, Joe Beam and that whole Brazilian thing, I mean, did you get it innately? Did you study it or?
Well, João is from Bahia, and he was a guitarist, of course. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those rhythms that now have names didn't have names then, but he taught me, and he taught me in very spiritual ways also. He would tell me, he said, don't play just like that, he said, play like the rain. Wow. And, that informed a lot of my playing elsewhere also.
I also saw on the list McCoy Tyner, Wayne Shorter, Pharoah Sanders, Eddie Harris. You played with all those folks too.
I actually had a chance to perform with them, yeah.
But you were also a member of one of my favorite bands, to me, one of the all-time greatest bands of all time. That was Herbie Hancock's NYDC band.
Oh, you knew about that.
Oh, please. On trombone was Julian Priester. On sax, or any reed he could pick up, was Benny Maupin. Yeah. On trumpet was Eddie Henderson. Right. It's one of the few bands where you could hear Buster Williams play electric bass. Yeah. And on drums was Billy Hart. And that was the band also where everyone had a Swahili name.
Yes,
right?
we did.
But yours was the only one that stuck.
Among other people, but we still call each other by those names.
And a lot of folks know you as Jabali.
Yes, they do.
Right. What does the name mean?
It implies moral strength.
in addition to all that physical strength you bring to playing the drums. Talk about that band a little bit. Your early memories of the Herbie Hancock NYDC band.
Well, for me, I had known about Herbie because I went to high school with Butch Warren. So
Played on those early records.
yeah, so Butch, he came back and actually I had a chance to hear some of the records anyway with Herbie, with a trumpet player named Donald Byrd. And so I knew who Herbie was. And then one time when I came to New York with Shirley, he was standing in the back of the Vanguard, just standing there. And I had a chance to talk to him at that point. And I was always a big fan of his because I'd heard the records. And I think he's an extraordinary musician, you know.
But at that point, when he was standing in back of the Vanguard listening to Shirley Horn, he had just started playing electric piano. He had just signed with Warner Brothers. Fat Albert Rotunda was like a commercial success.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but no, this was before he even went with Miles.
Wow, okay.
This is before all of that.
So you knew him for a number of years before the band.
Well, I knew who he was. I can't say that I actually knew him, but I knew enough to talk to him, speak to him. I was a fan of his even before he went with Miles.
So how did it come up to you to get to that incredible band?
Okay, when he left Miles, he had a tour, and the tour fell through. I can't remember exactly why, but he had no band at that point. So when he was trying to put a band back together, Buster Williams, the bass player, recommended me. Wow. And that's how he gave me a chance, you know.
But the band was nothing like he's ever done it before. It was totally different.
No, Woody Shaw recommended Eddie Henderson, who at that time was not only a doctor, but working in a hospital. In fact, at one point, he'd actually treated Thelonious Monk.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I hate to go on the tangent, but that's a great story. He was a grad student at the University of San Francisco. Monk was on tour, and the cops had picked him up, took him to a psychiatrist's house, and Eddie Henderson's just walking by. That's Thelonious Monk, and he ended up treating Monk.
Right.
It's a great story, actually. Right. Okay, so I'm sorry. So Eddie was in the band, and Julian Priester
and Julian came a little later because Garnett Brown was the original trombonist, but he was a studio musician. So we were already on the West Coast at that point, but he had to go back because he had so many other commitments. Mm-hmm. So Herbie just said, well, I said, who are you going to get? Because we were going to the West Coast town of Canada. What's that? Vancouver. Yeah, so we were going to Vancouver. So he said, I'm going to get Julian Priester. And I already knew who he was because he played with some of my favorite drummers and recorded with not only Philly Joe Jones, but Max Roach, some of Max's most innovative. Anyway, so Julian joined us in Vancouver. And then Benny Maupin had already joined us just before we came out to California, to the West Coast, where we met Eddie Henderson. And it was like that.
What a band, too. Some great records. Mm-hmm. You were talking about your influences. Let's go there. Who influenced you as a drummer, young in your life?
Well, Washington, D.C. had a lot of great drummers. Not only classical drummers, but it had a lot of great pop drummers, too. And I was lucky enough to be around them. Not many of them got to be famous, but one guy that had been Shirley's drummer before me was a guy named Harry Saunders, and he had made a couple of tracks on Sonny Rollins's record, The Bridge. But that was, I still play like Harry.
Harry, what's his last name?
Saunders.
Saunders. You know how many young drummers right now looking at Wikipedia, looking up Harry Saunders?
Oh my goodness.
And who else? I mean, among the bop players, who influenced you?
Well, let's see. Nobody I can name. I mean that somebody would know. But of course, Jimmy Cobb was enough to say. But there was a guy that recorded for Blue Note Records named Ben Dixon, who had before that been with Ike and Tina Turner.
Wow.
But he made some Blue Note records, organ records and stuff like that. And he was very influential. He taught me how to play in odd time signatures.
Billy, another great band that you're associated with in the 21st century is the Cookers. Eddie Henderson's in that band too.
Yeah.
Have you been, well, first of all, that band, how did they get together? I think
A similar kind of thing, because the band was originally gathered because of a record that Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard had made. I think that's Blue Note also. It's called Night of the Cookers.
Yes.
And so David Weiss, the guy that put this band together, called it the Cookers because he was involved with Freddie.
Right. I get it. The Night of the Cookers. Okay,
Yeah.
the Cookers. It's a great band, and that band has been together a little while now.
Well, yeah, I think it's about 15 years now.
Yeah, 15 years. Yeah. And at one point, I think it was a couple years ago, you guys had the most successful jazz record of the year.
I think somebody or something said that.
God, he's so modest. Billy also was nominated for a Grammy for what turned out to be Bobby Hutcherson's last record. It's a record called Enjoy the View, one of my, it's such a great record. Joey DeFrancesco on organ with David Sanborn on sax and Bobby Hutcherson and Billy Hart. How did that band get together?
I see. I think Joey recommended me, and he recommended me to Bobby, and he said that Bobby said, "Excellent choice."
He was right. and then Sanborn came along?
Well, I guess Sanborn and Joey each had been playing with Bobby separately, and I guess they decided to put the whole thing together. So they were looking, I guess, for a drummer that could be, cover both areas.
That's right. Tell the folks what you mean by both areas.
Well, like I told you, when I was a really young guy, I had played a sort of, what could you call it, pop music. I had played with, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. And, like we said, some of those kind of people.
So in other words, you had big ears. That's what you're saying. And as I mentioned earlier, you won the NEA Jazz Masters, which is incredible, along with Stanley Clarke, Cassandra Wilson, and Donald Harrison. It's a really big deal. How did you find out? Did someone just call you and say it, or did you know?
Yeah, somebody called me and said it.
And said what?
He said, we've elected you. You are now, he said, but we want to keep it a secret for the next 8 or 9 months or something. And so can you keep it a secret? I said, yeah, So she said, how do you feel? I said, I feel great. I'm really surprised. I'm really honored. But, I could think of some other guys that I would have thought of. And I mentioned the guy that just got it this year.
Yeah, Louis Hayes.
Louis Hayes, yeah.
You also mentioned. You also have been recording with an interesting band of late, featuring Ethan Iverson on piano.
Well, yeah, I'm sort of familiar with that one.
That's your current quartet.
Yes, it is.
Who's the sax player?
Mark Turner.
Oh, Mark Turner, right. And the bassist?
Ben Street.
With Ethan Iverson. You guys put out a great record a couple years ago. Is there another one coming?
Yeah, there's another one coming.
Anything you can tell us?
Well, I don't know the name of it. You know, we haven't put.
That's not your job?
Well, the last one, my daughter named it. You know.
And speaking of your kids, I go to San Francisco a lot, and I ran into your son.
Whoops. A lot of people say that.
And they run into him because he's a great musician.
Yes, he is.
Did you influence him on his chosen instrument?
Say that again, please.
Did you influence him?
Well, I guess I did in certain ways.
So modest.
Well, I wouldn't call it that either. I was always interested in, well, my grandmother was a concert pianist, and she was Marian Anderson's first accompanist. So I had picked up a little interest in that kind of music as a younger guy. And so I was always interested in that kind of music. So I guess I influenced my son in California like that.
His name is Lorca Hart. He's a great musician. Ladies and gentlemen, please, Billy Hart. Santi Debriano. Bill O'Connell. Okay, I have a request. I have a request from an audience member, so I'm going to ask this one question to each of you. Give me a short answer. How do you practice?
It's changed over the years. I do a little bit of technical stuff just to keep the fingers moving, and then after that, I just play. Pretty much, I just play. And I'm looking not only to play to keep my chops up, but I'm looking to write, because writing's a big part of what I do. So I can just be playing. Maybe I stumble upon something that I think, oh wow, maybe I could do something with that. So I'm just looking for the next phrase, the next tune, and I'll sit down and just explore, But I'll also play some tunes just to keep that going, and of course, if I have projects going, that's a different story. Yeah. Then I'll knuckle down and practice the music.
Santi?
I think my answer would be similar to Bill's. My musicianship is a constant evolution, and I have had exposure, but not that many teachers. So I've had to learn a lot myself, and I'm still doing that. I work on my guitar, I work on my bass, and I work on, and lately it's been piano, a lot of piano, and I'm working on my composition. And how do I practice? I like to just have time to just go to each one as I feel it. And there's always something to work on the bass. There's 4 strings, but last time I was doing a project of classical music. I'm always trying to learn Charlie Parker Head here, there. If I'm playing with somebody, this gives me new music. I have to learn that, and everything that I do seems to broaden my scope. But lately, also, I've been taking gigs on guitar. I have a little organ trio over on Staten Island, and we have gigs, actual gigs. We've been going into the assisted living spaces, and sometimes, in fact, we have a gig next week in front of the Lighthouse Museum on Staten Island. So we're starting to do that, and that has helped me a lot for the bass also. And the only other thing I would add to that is sometimes just walking in the park, floating in the ocean, ideas can come to me that would be of benefit to my musicality, you know? So it's a process, it's a life.
Life in jazz. Billy, how do you practice?
Well, I'm a lot older than these guys, if you hadn't noticed.
Guy's 82 on his next birthday.
So I learned by trying to keep up, with a lot of the newer concepts. And along with that, I'm a college professor, I guess you'd say, at a couple of universities. And so I try to keep track of a lot of the newer concepts that are coming along. And that keeps me pretty busy.
So the young people help you practice, just being around them.
Yes, for sure it does. And I'm very inspired by a lot of the newer guys.
Again, Bill O'Connor and his trio. Thank you, guys.
Well, we're going to play one more, but before Mark disappears, hey, I just want to thank you, Mark, for coming out here, man. It's a pleasure to hang out and to be with you. And
Thank you, Bill.
you're welcome. You're welcome. So once again, Billy Hart on drums, Santi Debriano on bass. I'm really thrilled that they're here, and it's always great to play with these two great musicians. So we're going to close with a blues I wrote called Zipline. And thank you all for coming out this evening. Appreciate it.
The Locano Trio, Santi Debriano on bass, Mr. Billy Hart on drums. Thank you so very much for coming down, ladies and gentlemen.